Alrighty. Let's get started, chat. How y'all doing today? Happy MLK Day for those of y'all that are in the United States. Hope y'all are doing well. Oh. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder, everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. If y'all have a question or concern, please go see a licensed professional and ask them. So, hope y'all are doing well. I feel good today. I hope y'all feel good today. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. So just let's run through announcements. So we're going to hopefully have a viewer interview, like a community interview on Wednesday. I know we've been doing a lot of subreddit posts and lectures and things like that. So I'm kind of feeling an interview. So hopefully we'll get that going. So hopefully we'll start interviewing a little bit more. I know a lot of y'all came to us originally because we would do interviews, and we just try to balance, sort of having like interviews with kind of like more applicable information that's like maybe a little bit more, focused, applicable to your life and sort of changing. So basically the way that I kind of think about this is like when I do an interview, I think to myself at the end of the interview, like, oh, here's a list of concepts that like we could sort of like teach people formally, right? So like, oh, in this interview, this person has this problem, this problem, this problem, this strength, and this strength. Okay, like how can we talk about those things so that people can sort of like hear the interview and then like also like take away key points. So we did an interview with Masayoshi a few weeks ago, and actually the gamer diet lecture that we did in the physiology of how you eat in starvation and things like that. Like this is actually very, very applicable to gamers. Like, so that lecture came out of that interview. So we've got a bunch of stuff that's kind of banked that we've wanted to talk about, and we're sort of getting through some of it. So hopefully we'll do an interview on Wednesday. The next thing, just a reminder that so as our community has changed and grown and gotten better, as people have been able to start, moving forward in their life, and we've also started to attract a different kind of crowd, we've noticed that there's been a lot more emphasis on sort of like achievement and success in our community, which is fantastic. And so we now actually have a careers Discord channel. So if you guys are interested in like focusing on your career and sort of figuring out what you want to do, have questions, want resources, stuff like that. So that's actually a growing part of our community. And so by all means, check out the Discord, join. Hopefully it'll be good. And so today we're going to do a couple of posts. We're going to talk a little bit about, hopefully if we get to it, we're going to talk a little bit about why people may not feel like they deserve love. So there's a great post about that. A little bit about people not wanting help, right? So like they feel like they don't want help, they don't deserve help, they don't want other people to help them, they don't want to help themselves, and so sometimes we can sort of have that kind of thinking. And so where does that come from, and how do we address it? And then before we get into some of that, we've got a couple of other, we've just got a lot of good stuff from our community, because I think people have just such insightful questions. And the other thing that I really love about this is that as y'all learn, the quality of your questions and the quality of the information that you provide is actually like so much better, which is fantastic. So the questions are just getting like better and better and better, right? So the cool thing about this is as our community is growing, instead of explaining the basics, people are now adding context to their questions. They're adding like some details from the things that they've learned. And as a result, like the quality of the question improves, and we can push the barrier of understanding, right? Because it's not the basic stuff. They've like thought through the basic 1, 2, 3 things. And so they're kind of stuck on number 4 and 5. So it's like, y'all will see this, where if you look at questions that people ask, like, they'll add a lot of context. They'll add about their own kind of self-reflection and things like that, which is awesome. It's great. So, but before we get into that, I thought we should just talk a little bit about personality. So what I want to do today, give me just 1 second. I'm just debating whether we want to just turn off chat for this lecture. But okay. Do y'all find chat helpful or distracting? What do y'all think? Both. Okay. So let me see if I can do... Does this work? Boom. Okay. GG'd. Distracting. Okay. So let's talk a little bit. I wonder if I need to recenter this because now it's like I'm over here. Okay. So I want to talk to y'all today a little bit about personality. So I think that most of us go through life like not really understanding how our personality is determined. We sort of take it as a given, right? Oh, let's take a quick look at this. Okay, most people find it distracting. Okay, so we're going to turn it off for now. I can still see it. So today we're going to talk a little bit... Christmas card. Nope. Christmas card. There we go. Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about personality. And the interesting thing about personality is that we tend to view personality as static, right? And so we say like, oh, I am this way or I am that way. But there's actually overwhelming evidence that personality changes over time. So for example, there are even things called personality disorders, which are when someone's personality is so extreme in a particular dimension that it interferes with their ability to like form relationships and be successful in life. And so we actually diagnose it as a pathological condition. The good news is that even if you have a personality disorder, it's treatable and changeable, right? So you can like, if you have a personality disorder, like if you're a narcissist, there are things that you can learn and change about your personality to shape it in the right direction. So today what I'm going to talk to you all about is how do we shape our personality? Now, this is something that we're going to lean heavily on sort of the Eastern perspective, and I'm going to start by explaining kind of why. So Western understanding of personality tends to be at a population level, right? So if we look at the best validated Western scientific construct of personality, it's the 5-factor model, which divides personality into 5 dimensions. And you can assess someone's like level on each of these dimensions. So how open are they? How agreeable are they? How extroverted are they? How conscientious are they? So how neurotic are they? So those are like the 5 dimensions. But the thing about Western personality analysis is it's not individual. So it's like population based. So what you could say is that you can, rank someone's neuroticism, and you can say this person is highly neurotic, and you can give them an individual, you can give a scenario and you can say, okay, how is this person going to behave? How are they going to interact in this scenario? And you can't really make a concrete behavioral prediction, right? You can sort of say in general, highly neurotic people or highly agreeable people will behave this way versus low agreeable people are less likely to behave that way. So you're talking about populations, you're talking about probabilities, which is very good. It's like kind of how Western science works, but it's not individual, right? So if you have high neuroticism, how you specifically behave and how to shape your individual personality is not something that Western science is actually like an expert at, because Western science tends to look at the population level and averages, right? So even the model of the 5-factor model is to try to average out a bunch of individuals to figure out what are these 5 characteristics that are like generally speaking applicable to everyone. So it's a very population-based system. So this is not, and people may sort of assume for a moment that that's the only way you can do things, right? How can you measure things at an individual level? And like you absolutely can. That's literally what you do as a clinician, right? So as a clinician, I have all of this data about personality and depression and epidemiology, but at the end of the day, an individual comes into my office and I have to make individual decisions based on their individual personality and try to help them move forward, right? So you can have an evidence-based treatment that works for a personality disorder, but once you get in the room with an individual, you have to apply that treatment at a level that there's going to be no randomized controls trial that is going to teach you what is going to work 100% for an individual patient in your office. The Eastern perspective on personality, though, I think is far more applicable to an individual level. And the reason for that is because the yogis were like looking at an N of 1, right? They weren't studying external things. They were studying things internally. So they asked the question, how does my mind work? right? And they looked at what was going on in their mind. And so they had perfect information on one person, but questionable whether it applied to anyone else. So we're going to use that model today. So the way that we're going to understand how to shape our personality has a few steps. The first is that we're going to talk a little bit about what is personality. How do we define personality? Like literally, what is it? Once we understand what it is, we can move on to, okay, so now that we know what it is, how does it get constructed? So like, where does it come from? Once we understand how it gets constructed and where it comes from, we can start to make alterations in the way that we are shaping our personality, because now we understand how it gets put together, so we can change how we put it together. At this point, we're going to talk a little bit about how most people shape their personalities, and then an alternative to the way that most people do it, okay? I'm going to use some gaming analogies there. And then we'll hopefully leave you with sort of an idea of how you can go about shaping your personality in a particular direction. And this sort of makes sense because if you look at monks, for example, right? So like people who are very spiritually adept, they seem chiller, they seem calmer, they're more open to things, they're able to be like more resilient. There's all kinds of, data. We talked about ADHD and parenting the other day, where there was a study that showed that mindful parenting reduces symptoms of child ADHD and improves like parenting behaviors. And so if you kind of think about that, like, how does that work, right? Like, what's going on in the mind of the person, of the parent, where you can teach them a particular way of behaving, which then over time will shape their personality, which results in like all kinds of benefits. So you can absolutely adjust your personality through essentially spiritual practices, like meditation, things like that, right? So they're maybe not spiritual anymore. They're starting to become scientific. So this is what the yogis did. They like learned how to be like less reactive to stuff, more open to things. They're more motivated, more driven, like more focused. They're able to control what they eat. So they shape all kinds of things about themselves. And so we're going to share that with y'all, okay? So the first is, what is personality? So how do we know whether your personality is like different from someone else's personality, right? You are an individual, you have your own personality. Maybe you've got a friend, you've got a partner, you've got a parent, you've got a sibling, and they have a different personality. So if I was an alien observing people from space, how would I figure out whether two people have different personalities or the same personality, right? And so essentially what personality is our individual way of reacting to a particular scenario. So if someone rings my doorbell, do I, open it up right away, or do I like peek through the window to see who it is? So like people will do all kinds of different behaviors given a common scenario. The first day when I go to class, where in the classroom do I sit? Do I sit in the front? Do I sit all the way in the back? Do I sit somewhere in the middle? Do I try to sit away from other people? Do I try to sit next to certain people? How do I select who I sit close to, right? So all of these, even if we take an individual scenario and we present 10 people with the same scenario, it is their reaction to that scenario and how they behave that shapes their personality. So my personality is a combination of where I sit in the classroom, with what I do first thing in the morning, how I open the door to my house, what I do when someone cuts me off when I'm driving, like how I relate to someone who is 15 minutes late for a date that we're supposed to be on. So all of this constellation of how I behave with the outside world determines my personality, right? And so like each of these individual things, I may overlap with some people in some ways. So for example, at the very beginning of my college career, I started sitting at the front because I was a tryhard. And up at the front were all of the other tryhards. And then gradually over time, as I started to fail my classes and stuff like that, I started to sit towards the back, because then I was ashamed and I didn't answer any of the questions and I tried to disappear into my seat most of the time I was in the class, right? And then towards like medical school, I sort of sat off to the side because I was just kind of like doing my own thing. I'll let the tryhards be in the front. I'll let the failures be in the back. And I'm just going to be like chilling, like doing my own thing on the side. And then there were the side sitters that came and joined me and we got along great, right? So there are these like shared personality characteristics, which you can see in an individual scenario. But it's not like all the side sitters are also like all the door peekers, right? Like there's all kinds of different, they're not the same people as the road ragers. And so while there are shared characteristics, essentially personality is the way that you respond to a particular scenario. And when we take all of the different ways that you respond or react or you're inclined to behave in a particular scenario, and we put them all together, that is the personality. That is the individual you. Okay? So then the question kind of becomes, okay, like where does the personality come from, right? So if these are all your individual reactions to particular scenarios, how does your mind know how to behave? Where does your inclination come from? So this is where we're going to move to a little bit of Sanskrit, okay? So the yogis essentially came up with a handful of terms to understand the mind, okay? So we talked about what is personality, right? Oh, hold on a second. I think I turned off Bluetooth. Okay. Okay. So let's go back. Okay. All right. So let's just run through what we're going to talk about today. So what is personality? Right? It is a constellation of reactions to scenarios. Right? It's the way that we interact with the world. Uh-oh, I see a little bit of lagging. Okay. Next is, what are the components? So like, where does personality come from? So then it kind of follows that, like our reactions to scenarios are going to be based on our experiences, right? So for example, let's say I'm a front sitter. So I walk into the classroom and I sit at the front. And then I make an observation that if you're in the front, you get called on a lot more. As a result, I get called on. I don't know the answer to a question. I feel stupid. And then what's going to happen is I've been shaped a little bit, right? I've been altered. I've had an experience that then makes me now sit in the back, right? So suddenly, like in that moment, my personality has been shaped, okay? So let's try to understand a little bit about what are the components of the mind. So how did the yogis sort of figure this out? The first thing that they noticed is that there's a part of the mind called the manas. For those of you that have watched Dr. K's guide, you'll be very familiar with this, okay? So the manas is the emotional mind and is judgmental. So it's like reactive, okay? So for example, do you like pineapple on pizza? Some people will say, yes, it's delicious. Some people will say it is disgusting. And it is a sin of the greatest magnitude. But if you think a little bit about how you determine whether you like it or not is irrelevant. Let's think a little bit about how you decide which camp you're in. You take a bite of it, and then some part of your being says, yes, this is amazing, or, oh, this is awful, right? Oysters are another good example of like, some people are super into it. Some people are like, this is slimy and cold and overly salty, right? So the manas is essentially our reactive mind that also experiences emotions, because emotions are also reactive, right? So let's say that, I walk into class one day and then someone asks me a question. They're like, hey, how did you sleep last night? And then like, I notice everyone is looking at me and they're like grinning a little bit. And it's like, what on earth is going on? Right? So I feel a little bit embarrassed. I don't understand what's happening logically, but my mind reacts to that scenario. I recognize that I'm the butt of the joke in some way. There's something weird going on, right? So I'm on my guard. I answer very carefully. So that sort of emotional response is like from the manas. So it's like reactive, it's sudden, it's quick. The next thing is our ahamkar, or our ego, or sense of self. Okay? So this is like our identity. This is not a reaction. It's not an emotion. It is a sense of self. It's also not logical or analytical. It's just, I believe I am this, right? So it's like an ego. Generally speaking, the ahamkar acts to protect you from things in the manas. So when I'm feeling ashamed of myself, my ego or sense of identity will do something to actually alleviate that shame. And sometimes it can be kind of paradoxical, right? So I'll give you guys just a simple example of this. If I'm feeling like I'm a bad person, I'm ashamed of myself, the ahamkar can actually tell me, yeah, you deserve that because you're nothing. You know, you don't deserve any love. So if I like tell myself that I don't deserve love, then I can't feel rejected because I never should have gotten it in the first place. Even though paradoxically, it may seem like that is actually hurting you to determine your identity as someone who doesn't deserve love. If you really think about it, it's actually really good armor, right? So if it's a part of the natural order for you to not be loved by another human being, then like life is far less painful because everything sort of makes sense. There's like no hope. You're just like insulated from it, right? You start to become numb. So ego can be kind of bizarre. Next thing is a samskar. So in the East, a constellation of samskars is our personality. So a samskar is sort of an impression in the mind that is recalled in a particular scenario. So it's like activating programming, okay? In Western psychology, the closest thing is a schema from the cognitive behavioral realm. So like, for example, you know, if I walk into the bathroom, like even if I've never been to that bathroom before, let's say I'm at a restaurant, my mind knows how to operate the toilet in the bathroom, right? And how does my mind know that? It's because when it sees the bathroom, it recalls particular programming. It says, oh, we need to access bathroom.exe. But samskars are not just that simple. So they also get to be quite complex. So let's say that I'm in a relationship where my partner has cheated on me. And as a result of like my partner cheating on me, I start to become distrustful. And then when I start to get into the next relationship and my partner is 15 minutes late for a date, like cheating.exe or cheatingparanoia.exe starts to activate. And so these like pent up emotions from my past relationship start to project and come out as malware in my current relationship. Okay? And so that's another example of a samskar. So we talk about samskars oftentimes as like negative things, but they don't necessarily have to be negative. They're just programming in the mind. Okay? So then if we think a little bit about personality, personality is a GG. Okay, that's okay. We don't need it. So if we think about a little bit about programming in the mind, we got through the Sanskrit stuff, which is the important thing. Okay? So if we think about programming in the mind, it's essentially like a collection of samskars. And then our collection of samskars is our personality, right? Because like when we respond to different things in different ways, whether I'm a front sitter or a back sitter, depends on the samskar of getting called on in class. So when I get called on in class and I don't know the answer, that shame makes an impression in my mind, goes dormant in my mind, and then like sits around and then reactivates in particular scenarios, okay? So the way that we form samskars is essentially by improper digestion of experiences. So I'll give you guys just a simple, let's use that example, okay? So if I have, so let's say I sit at the front of the classroom and I get called on by my teacher. And then like, I don't know the answer. So then I feel ashamed of myself. And then there's like two different options at that point, right? So I can sit and I can process the shame and I can kind of talk to my friends about it. I can talk to my parents about it, whatever. And if I have like a supportive group and I share my feelings and I work through it, you know, like maybe my dad says something like, well, you know, like I understand that it was embarrassing for you. So you've got like two choices, right? You can either study harder and therefore be prepared and get called on, or what you can do is retreat to the back of the class. You've got either of those two options. But even understanding that you have those two options involves a certain amount of like processing and thinking about your situation, okay? So most people as they go through life don't really process and think through scenarios when they happen to them, right? And generally speaking, we're not like actively processing stuff day in and day out. If stuff happens to you in life, you're not like sitting there and like reflecting on it on a daily basis. You just kind of get up and live your day and you have an accumulation of experiences. As those experiences happen, they tend to go dormant, right? So let's say that the school scenario again. So I get called on and sitting in the front row. I feel ashamed of myself. And then I go home and I feel shame, right? I feel like kind of crappy. So what do? Do I sit there and think about it? Do I process it? No, I turn on a video game, log on to some kind of social media or content, consumption website, and my mind disappears into the void for like 4 hours. And then by then the shame is kind of like calmed down some. It hasn't been processed. And then like I go to sleep. The next day I wake up, I go to class. And what do I feel as I walk into the classroom? That shame arises again and says, hey, go sit at the back. And then suddenly that samskara is now controlling my behavior. Now I've made a shift in my personality and I go and sit at the back of the classroom. And then I feel a little bit relieved because, okay, now I won't be called on. It's like not a big deal. As I leave class that day, once again, I kind of remembered like, oh, maybe I could have like sat at the front. Maybe I should have read yesterday instead of playing video games. But like that kind of makes me feel guilty. I go home. I'm feeling kind of guilty. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, let me just play games again. So I play games again. Now I don't feel even as prepared for school the next day. So the next day I go in, I kind of like go sit in the back and then suddenly I've lost, right? It's like my personality has been altered. The way that I've reacted to situations has been altered. I'm now starting to be controlled by some of these behaviors like shame and guilt and stuff like that. I'm starting to dig a hole for myself and it's kind of like GG. Right? So the way that we actually live most of our life is the way that most people play video games. So I know this sounds kind of weird, but like if you think about a competitive game. So once you calibrate, for example, to a particular MMR in a competitive game, let's call it Overwatch or LoL or Dota or whatever, most people historically, if you look at most of the player base, they will stay at their particular skill for their entire lifespan, right? So like 1,500 MMR players will stay 1,500 MMRs. Like if you go to if you play a game of Dota, for example, I just play Dota, but this is true of LoL or Overwatch or Call of Duty or whatever. If you have a particular MMR, there are people who will have thousands of hours played and like will still suck at the game, right? And if you kind of think about that, it's kind of surprising. Like how can you play for thousands and thousands and thousands of hours and like still suck at the game and like not get better? And this is the other interesting thing is if you look at people who are at the top of, let's say you look at the challenger level in LoL or immortal rank in Dota or whatever, right? Or like diamond rank in StarCraft or masters in StarCraft or whatever game you want to. A lot of times they haven't played more than like people who are 5,000 MMR below them, right? There does not appear to be, thank you, hon. There does not appear to be a correlation between how many hours you play and how good you are at the game. So you can be a professional player, right? So like, for example, Team Spirit won TI last year, and I don't know how many hours they've played Dota, but I can guarantee you that there are people who are 2,000 MMR who have played the same number of hours of Dota. So what this sort of implies is actually something that's quite staggering, which is that most of like when we play video games, we don't think about the game afterward, right? So how do we stay low MMR despite thousands of hours of play? It's because we're like robots. So I play a game, I like pick a random hero. I don't really like think about the game after. I don't watch my own replays. I don't like process or think about what I'm doing critically. I just queue up for the next game. I'm just kind of like on autopilot. And as a result, like I don't actually get better. Right? So I'm not going to improve my personality at Dota. The way that I react to scenarios in the game does not change because I'm not thinking about them afterward. So if I lose my lane, I'm just going to go and TP there 3 times and just continue to feed. I'm not going to make any adjustments because I haven't been critical about the way that I played the game. And it actually happens to be exactly the same way in real life, right? So as I go through negative experiences, I don't actually process or think critically about how I'm like, what's going on here, right? I just sort of like autopilot it. And so I stay the same damn MMR. We start to think about personality as static. And then we like just live our lives with this personality, right? So then we assign labels to ourselves. We say, I'm lazy. I'm not a morning person, right? I just can't do that. I can't handle parties. I'm just not like, I am not like that. And so you start to define things about yourself, which then start to doom you, right? Because now, like, if you're lazy, like GG noob, like what can you do? You can try to biohack your way to whatever you want to, but like Laziness plus all these, and this is why the biohacking, life hacking industry is so big. It's because people assign themselves with a personality attribute that is static. And then like, since that's unchangeable, I need to use some kind of like broken OP technique to bypass my core personality, right? That's why this industry is so big. It's because you don't need to change. You just need to take this herbal supplement and your life will transform, right? So then the question becomes, but like, can we gain MMR in a game of Dota, in the game of Dota? And the answer is absolutely yes, we can gain MMR, right? We can think about what we do. We can reflect on what we can do. We can start to be intentional about how we behave, how we react to experiences. Is actually not, step away from intentionality of action for a second, but how we react and process and digest experiences will result in MMR gains, right? So if I lose my lane, I go watch the replay and I realize, okay, this is a scenario where I did A and I should have done B. So if I learn from that mistake, then my MMR will increase a little bit. And the interesting thing is that is absolutely true in real life. So the first group of people who did this were the yogis. I mean, maybe there were other people. I don't know the ancient history of Africa, for example. So there may have been people who predated the yogis there. But generally speaking, yoga is about 5,000 to 6,000 years old. So like, 3,000, 4,000 BC or BCE, like people were figuring this out. And essentially what even now we sort of get this, right? We have a class of people like monks or yogis who we sort of assume are like in control of their crap, right? They're able to like wake up at 4 a.m. every day and like meditate for 3 hours and like do yoga. They're able to like not be tempted by sexual desires, not be tempted or be able to resist their sexual desires, be able to resist dietary desires, be like non-monetary, things like that. So we have yogis out there who are like capable of controlling all this crap. And we look at them and we're like, that person does that because they're a monk, right? That's their job. But if you really think about it, now the way that they react to scenarios is transformed drastically. Because you had someone who used to react this way, this way, this way, this way. And now the way they react to all of those scenarios has changed a lot. So essentially what they've done is altered their personality, right? They've literally changed the way that they react to scenarios. Therefore, that becomes a personality alteration. And so then if we kind of stop and think about it for a second, like there's a way they did that, right? They consistently do that. This is a profession that consistently trains people to alter the way they react to scenarios. So this is like a group of super high MMR people, right? This is like an in-house league that only has immortal players. So what I want to share with y'all today is essentially like how to do that, right? And it turns out to be actually relatively simple. So if you want to start shaping your personality, instead of focusing on what you do, right? So this is what everyone focuses on. They focus on the behavior. They're like, how do I wake up early in the morning? How do I study more? How do I do this? This is my problem. This is my problem. This is my problem. They're always focused on the problem and looking forward. Instead, what you need to do is look at your reactions to things, right? So if I lose a game of Dota, I'm thinking, how do I win the next game? What should I pick? And you guys may have fallen into this trap where you get crushed by a particular hero. You're like, that hero is so friggin' OP. I'm going to pick that hero. I'm going to win the game. It's going to be easy. I'm always looking forward. How do I fix this problem? How do I fix this? Our entire society is like based on fixing problems, right? Oh, we've got this thing that will help you fix your problem. We've got this biohack here. We're trying to fix this. We're trying to fix this. It's always moving forward. How do we increase quarterly profits? How do we sign bigger deals? How do we have more customers? How do I get a raise? How do I get promoted? It's always like looking forward, how to do better. So what we don't look at is the way we react to things. And this is how we get stuck, right? So what happens in a game of Dota if I get crushed by a particular hero and I pick that hero because that hero is OP? I lose, right? And then, but hold on a second, but like that hero is so OP, right? So I need to be less lazy. I need to start drinking this supplement. And then my life will transform. You're always looking forward. And so your personality doesn't change. Because how is personality shaped? Personality is not shaped by what you do. It's shaped by how you react to particular scenarios. It is your default response to things. And if you can change your default response to things, your life will transform. I kid you not. Let's go back to the person who sits at the front of the classroom answers a question in a particular way. They get the question wrong. They feel ashamed of themselves. And remember, there's two options, right? So on the one hand, I can say, okay, screw this. I'm going to avoid the scenario. I'm going to sit at the back. Option number one. Or, wow, like this really felt bad. I feel ashamed of myself. How am I going to react to that? I'm actually going to make sure I study tomorrow. I'm going to study tonight so that tomorrow, whenever I get asked a question, I'm going to be ready for it. And if you think about these two people, you say that these two people have different personalities. I wish I had that other personality. I wish when when I lost a game of Dota, I learned from my mistake and went into the next game like prepared to do even better. I wish that when I did poorly in life, when I got dumped by a boyfriend or girlfriend, that I reacted stronger so that I would be like a stronger human being instead of resentful in my next relationship, right? This is what we wish. And what we all focus on is how do I be healthier in my next relationship? How do I find a successful relationship? And this is the other problem that we run into with relationships is that when we have a bad relationship, we go and look for the perfect partner, right? We look for a partner who will like be less this way and more this way. And so you end up with online dating profiles where everyone is looking for like the perfect thing. They're like, oh, now I have access to the internet, which has like 100,000 people on it. So let me list out all of my requirements. And as long as I find the right person, I'm looking for Mr. Right. I'm looking for Mrs. Right, right? All the good ones are taken. They're not available anymore. What I want is not available. It's out of stock. But instead, what they should be doing is if this particular person, if this relationship didn't go well, what was my contribution to it? And this is why people like it's so hard to date online right now is because people have stopped being like self-reflective. Like people are just like, instead of changing myself at all, what I'm looking for is like some weird, Frankenstein's monster or chimera of like different pieces of things that is assembled into the perfect human that I want. And I'm looking for that thing. And then like the problem is that you may have found that thing, but that thing may not want to date you because have you done any kind of self-reflection? And so if we want to shape our personality, it's not about fixing the problem. It's about looking at how we react to particular scenarios, because that's the training of a monk. The core training of a monk is to look at their reactions to things, right? It's to eat something that they find tasty or not tasty and study your reaction to a particular thing. As you process that reaction, as you work through that reaction, you will be free of that personality change. Now, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that this is successful. Forget about monks for a second. Let's go back to science. So the practice of clinical psychotherapy is essentially a formalized process of this, okay? So when someone comes into my office with a personality disorder, this is an aspect of their personality, which through helping them change the way that they react and study the way that they react, I can actually like help them over the course of a year or two no longer become narcissistic. And if you think about that, like how on earth does that work? And what literally happens is someone will come in and they'll say, Christmas was a mess. And I'll say, what happened? Well, like someone like didn't like, they invited me, but like they didn't even think to ask me about my dietary restrictions. And I'm kind of confused. And I'm like, okay, well, like, they're your parents. Don't they know your dietary restrictions? Like, why would they need to ask you about them? And they're like, well, I decided to go vegan 3 months ago. And they like didn't ask about that. And it's like, okay, so your parents are 72, you're 41, and you're upset because your parents didn't think to ask about dietary restrictions, right? Like, I'm confused, but that's what the narcissistic person thinks. They're like, I've made such a big change, and they didn't even think to ask about it. And so I went there and there was like no vegan food. And so I'm kind of confused, but like this is the mind of a narcissistic person. So as we sit there and we sort of think a little bit about, okay, so like, what's your expectation, right? Like, what do you think they should do? Like, at what interval should they ask you if you've made dietary restrictions, right? And as you start to like ask these kinds of questions, it's quickly becomes absurd that, your parents are going to ask you like, what, once every 3 months, once a year? By the way, have you decided to go vegan? Like, people don't do that. But in the mind of a narcissistic person, they don't sort of realize that, right? So like their reaction to this scenario is to feel hurt. And this in turn has to do with their ahamkar and prior samskars. Because remember, narcissism itself is a consequence of samskars and ahamkar. So this person wasn't born narcissistic. They became narcissistic that way. So somewhere along the way, people either neglected their needs or they had a parent who was narcissistic, right? So like the parent was like always blaming other people for like not asking them questions or whatever. So you can start to like look at how that reaction formed. So in clinical psychotherapy, what you essentially do is show people how they react to scenarios. And as you focus on how you react to a scenario, you start to alter your own perceptions. You start to alter your personality, literally. And then you start to change the way that you behave. It becomes automatic, right? So, and this is the kind of thing, if you guys have played video games, you understand this. Like, if I do replay analysis of my own thing and I make a conclusion, right, I realize, oh, I should have done this, I should have done this, I should have done this. The next time I go into a game, that learning is going to be like operating in the background and is going to automatically shape my behavior, right? It's like if I decide, oh, I didn't buy enough regen in lane. And it's like, oh, crap. So the next time, like, I just go into the game, I buy more regen. I walk into the lane, and then, like, the problem has solved itself. It's like, and this is the most shocking thing that I think people don't realize. Everyone thinks fixing problems is hard. And it's like, yes, fixing problems is hard. But what's way easier is actually fixing yourself. And then the problems downstream become, like, easy to solve because you yourself have changed. Your default mode of operation has changed. Your personality has changed. So how do you do that? It comes down to studying your reactions. This is the biggest issue, is we're so focused on fixing the problem that we're not looking at how we react to things. So I know it sounds kind of like super simple, but focus on your reactions. So in a particular situation, this is like, we're going to teach y'all a meditation, right? So consider a scenario, and like when you go into the scenario, just notice yourself, okay? I want you to pay attention to your heartbeat, pay attention to your pulse, pay attention to your breathing rate, whether you're sweating, whether you're relaxed, whether you're like, whatever is going on. Just pay attention to yourself and notice what your mind or your body is telling you, right? So it's saying, don't sit at the front, don't sit at the front, don't sit at the front. So the first step is to notice something, okay? The next step is to play the tape through to the end. So as you sit down and you kind of think about it, I want you to this is tricky because fears don't live up under scrutiny, okay? So the way that you kind of like overcome this is like if your mind is telling you like, okay, if we sit at the front, don't sit at the front. Front is bad. That's going to be an instinctive reaction. It comes from the manas, okay? You're going to say, don't sit at the front. And so instead your mind is like, okay, let's go sit at the back. And so play the tape through to the end. So ask yourself, what will happen if I sit in the front? And then your mind will be like, we don't want to get called on. And then you'll think, okay, so like what will happen if we get called on? Well, we're not going to know the answer. Well, hold on a second. Like we may know the answer, right? We may know the answer. We may not know the answer. But in our mind, that fear assumes that we don't know the answer. So it's kind of like bizarre, right? So like now we're being shaped by a possibility. It's not even a probability. Like there's 8 people in the front row. The teacher asked us yesterday. There's actually a decent chance we won't get asked at all. So play the tape through to the end. Okay, if we get asked the question, maybe we know the answer, maybe we don't know the answer. Okay, what's the consequence of not knowing the answer? Well, I'm going to feel stupid. Are you going to get a bad grade? No. Well, I'm going to feel dumb. Okay. So what? Well, I don't like to feel dumb. Okay. So like, are you willing to like give it a shot? Like, let's just see what happens. Let's like see, just pay attention. And so like when you combat that fear, like at the end of the day, you're going to kind of hit up that fear of like, I don't want to feel dumb. And now you've got 2 options. So I know it sounds kind of bizarre, but even doing this amount of study may be enough for you to sit at the front of the classroom. And if you do get called on and you don't know the answer, notice your reaction to that. And just tell yourself, okay, this is an experiment that like we're going to sit at the front. We're going to see what happens. This is not a game that I'm trying to win. This is a game that I'm trying to learn. Right? Which is, how do you climb MMR? You play games not to win necessarily. You play games sometimes to learn. Like, I'm going to try this thing with intentionality. I'm going to try to buy more regen in lane, and I'm going to see what happens. Right? So whether you win the game or you lose the game, suddenly you've created some degree of detachment from the outcome of the game because you know going in that this could be rough. But you're going to learn a lot more, and you'll actually shape a samskar, and you'll alter your personality as a result. You'll learn. Right? And so even if that happens, I would say that, 85% chance in this scenario that your worst fears are not realized. Like, I know it's kind of a completely arbitrary percentage. But generally speaking, the fears that we have in our mind are not realized if we behave with intention. What we realize is that, like, our fears are way worse in our mind than usually what reality is. And so even if we do get called on, then just like notice your reaction. You'll be amazed at like what you sort of realize is like, actually doesn't affect my grade. In fact, now that I feel stupid, like I feel either like distracting myself or studying. So now I've got a choice. Do I want to distract myself or do I want to study? Well, I actually kind of want to study. Like, I want to feel good tomorrow when I sit in the class. I want to feel good about like being prepared to answer questions. Right. And then so like it's kind of bizarre, but that's like literally how you change your personality. By studying the reaction, you will naturally start gravitating towards the right thing. Because here's the thing, sitting at the back of the class is actually a strategy to feel good about yourself. Right. So like this is the big thing about, altering your personality, is that through studying your own reactions, what you can do is essentially feel the same way, but in a more successful manner. So if the goal is to feel good about myself, because that's why I'm sitting in the back of the class, right? I don't want to feel bad about myself. If I one day make the discovery, and this is done through studying your reactions, that I can sit at the front of the classroom and feel even better than what I could if I sat at the back of the classroom, if I'm prepared for class and I know the right answer. It feels amazing. It actually feels better than sitting at the back of the classroom. Then suddenly what I've done is I've changed something very important, because all of our avoidance strategies are there to help us, right? They're there to help us avoid pain and feel good about ourselves. But if I suddenly have a strategy that allows me to feel good about myself and even feel better than sitting at the back of the classroom, then I'm going to actually start picking that strategy. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but I'm going to start studying more. I'm going to start preparing for class. And once you make that shift, things become way easier in your life. Because not only do you feel better about yourself, but you are starting to be objectively more successful because you're making better decisions. And so shaping your personality ultimately comes down to understanding your reactions to things and playing the tape through to the end. And studying as you make an intentional change in the world, studying how your reaction changes. And as you keep doing this over and over and over again, whether it be the narcissistic person in psychotherapy who's sort of like studying their reaction, playing the tape through, what does it truly mean? Okay, like how would it feel to tell people that you're vegan next time? Oh, it actually feels totally fine. Oh, it's actually easier than like not telling them and then throwing a fit afterward. And so essentially what happens with narcissistic people is they discover that not being narcissistic is actually the more winning strategy. So they stop being narcissistic once they sort of internalize and truly realize that this is not working well, right? And so in that same way, if you want to shape your personality, don't focus on fixing the problem. Focus on studying your reaction and then playing the tape through to the end. And then your third step is going to be implementing an intentional experiment where you're like watching your reaction to that thing. And as you start doing this, I guarantee you your MMR in real life will start to climb. Questions? Someone's asking, does DBT work for narcissism? I'm going to go ahead and say sure. So I think that DBT involves a component of mindfulness, right? Which is rooted in meditation and the yogic tradition. And the yogic tradition was like a cure for narcissism. So you're going to get some diluting effects because DBT is specifically focused on BPD. So the mindfulness practices are geared towards BPD as opposed to narcissism, but there are some good effects. So I have a different meditation regimen for narcissism than DBT. Okay, so there's good questions here. The first is, how do I change things I can't control, like impulsive emotions? So nowhere have I said that you should change your behavior, right? So you don't need to control impulsive emotions. What you need to do is pay attention to your reactions. So once I have an impulsive emotion, there's going to be a reaction that results in a behavior. Like, you can't control the emotion. That's the whole point of understanding the manas, is that you can't control the manas. Like, you can't control whether you like pineapple on pizza or you don't like pineapple on pizza. So your initial response to things is not something that you can control. What you can adjust is your reactivity to that initial thing. So when I walk into the room, if I have a sum scar that makes me feel like an idiot every time I walk into a classroom, I cannot control that sum scar. The sum scar, the programming will activate, right? I'll walk into the classroom, I'll feel like an idiot. What I can control, though, is the way that I react to that stimulus. So I can pay attention, I can take a deep breath, I can engage in physiology, right? So check out Breath and Mind in Dr. K's guide if you guys haven't. So you can like take a deep breath and you can say, okay, we're going to sit at the front. It's going to be terrifying. So be it. Let me go and sit at the front. Terror, here we come. And then you can't control the terror. Like you're going to feel terror as you sit down in the front seat. You're going to be like sweating. Okay, we're going to breathe. We're going to breathe. And then you're going to realize, oh my God, I've survived. I did it. Success. Good job. So you can control the way that you react to things, but not your initial thing, not your initial response to something. Okay? Can you back up your claims with science? Yeah, so like, this is kind of interesting, right? So like, I mean, these things are so like you can look at the clinical efficacy of any paper on DBT and borderline personality disorder, right? Like if you want to see the clinical, like the scientific response to this. You can also look at things like MBT and BPD or narcissism. So there's like tons of research out there about psychotherapy for personality disorders, which shows that it's effective. There's tons of research out there about, 5-factor model. So I would start with like, honestly, just Wikipedia and just like look at some of the references for the 5-factor model. Right. And then if you actually go and you talk to someone who like studies 5-factor model, like, and you ask them, based on 5-factor, can you predict how an individual will respond in a scenario? They will say, no, I cannot. They can give you a general idea that these kinds of people are more likely to respond this way. So this is like super fundamental stuff. Yeah.
Where's my phone?
I think it's in the where my wallet is.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. How much does this help getting past mental disabilities? I'm not quite sure. So generally speaking, I think this is independent of mental disabilities. So like, I don't think it's mental disabilities apply at all, unless your disability has something to do with your ability to observe yourself. So the key thing here is that you need to be able to observe your reaction to things. And if you have difficulty doing that, like that may be a slow road to climb, right? So a good example of this is if you have very, very high emotional reactivity, you may not be able to do this studying your reaction to things like very easily. So you may just have to start with like smaller things, right? So you need to grind on weak mobs before you start to tackle the bigger stuff. Doesn't being critical to oneself breed anxiety? Sure. So there's a key thing. I'm not saying be critical, right? So critical is a judgment. We're not talking about being critical. We're talking about observation. So, and you're correct that being critical breeds anxiety because like then you're beating yourself up and you feel bad about yourself and you're worried. But observation actually breeds the opposite, right? So being critical is to make a judgment, is to like conclude something. But an observation is not making a conclusion. It's just making an observation. We're actually super hands-off. We're just going to see what happens. And so by adopting that non-judgmental error, we actually reduce anxiety. So you are correct that being critical can breed anxiety, but we're not being critical. We're being observational. We're studying our reaction, right? So it's actually very different. And it's a really good question because oftentimes when we are self-reflective, we default to a critical mode, right? When I study myself, all I can see is criticisms. I'm not truly observational. I'm very harshly self-judgmental. That too is part of a humkar and a samskar. Because I've decided somewhere along the way that like I'm someone who like isn't perfect and I can always be better. I can always be better. I can always be better. And if that is your identity of never being satisfied, never being perfect, and never being enough, then any kind of reaction that you have to yourself, which you're not even aware of, it becomes so automatic, right? Because then you're beating yourself up. It's like simple. So like it happens like that. Oh, I could have done this better. I could have done this better. I'm so stupid. this person is better than I am, that person is better. That's not studying yourself. It's being self-critical. That's the activation of the samskara. It's not actually like observing the samskara. It's within the samskara, if that makes sense. So like the right thing to do if you're hypercritical is to observe yourself and just ask yourself, why am I being so critical of myself here? Where do I get the idea that like everyone is better than me? Like, where does that come from? So like play the tape through to the end. Like ask yourself why, until you'll get to something at the bottom. And this is the kind of thing that, if you work with a therapist or coach or something like that, like they will help you get there faster. Therapists aren't really trained in this model, but they do the same work. Okay? Okay. Okay, so this is a great question. So y'all are asking good questions that are sort of missing the point. How do we trust that our analysis of our reactions is correct? Great question. So remember, the first step is not your analysis of your reaction, but is the observation of the reaction. And is the observation of the reaction, if done with like properly, right? So just observe. So like, how do you know if your observation is correct? It just is an observation. The analysis is what comes afterward, right? So like science doesn't lie, but interpretations are very critical. So you're correct that analysis needs to be done at some point, but make sure that you understand clearly that the first step is just data collection. It's just observe your reaction, notice your reaction. As you play the tape through to the end, be aware. So here's like one tip, which is how emotional or numb do you feel? If you feel calm when you are doing your analysis, then it is likely that your analysis is more correct. If you feel emotional, it is unlikely that your analysis will be correct. Here's another tricky thing. Here's the thing that trips everyone up. If you feel numb when you do your analysis, it is unlikely to be correct. So numbness is a sign of like a high level of emotion that is present, but is suppressed. So it'll be shaping your analysis quite heavily. This is the big problem that people run into when they think they are hyperlogical, is that they're not like, it's not like their limbic system, their emotional cortex of their brain is like non-functional, right? It's just being suppressed, but it's still shaping their thoughts. So the key thing to understand about analysis is you want your mind to be calm and balanced, which is what tends to happen when you guys watch our interviews and stuff, when people have this like emotional catharsis. There's a high level of emotion, which we then process, right? We decompress it. We don't numb it out. And then afterward, people are left in a space of mind where they like have a realization. And so then your analysis is correct. Can you lose some scars, the schemas due to a stressful event? Have in mind PTSD? Absolutely, right? So PTSD is actually the one diagnosis in the West that perfectly overlaps with the Eastern concept of the mind. So this is true, right? Like, so the mind works in one way. And so I think good evidence that this is correct is that the Western path of exploration discovered PTSD. The Eastern path of exploration essentially discovered the same thing. So you have two independent investigators that are arriving at the same conclusion. So what is PTSD? I have a particular event that happens, which has a powerful impact on me, which does not get processed or digested, and then sits in my mind and then arises in particular scenarios, right? This is why people have flashbacks. They have nightmares. They have hypervigilance when they have PTSD. Their mind is constantly on the lookout for like the source of danger. So now our personality has almost altered, right? The way that we react to scenarios has changed. And so that's what PTSD is. And the good news is that there are treatments for PTSD, right? You can do psychotherapy, which is literally the process of like bringing up some of these things and emotionally digesting them. And then you can no longer have PTSD. You can be cured of it. So PTSD is actually a really, really good example of the fact that some scars can be cleansed. And if you look at that in the yogic process, right? So like that's a big part of it. So as people, go and do spiritual study and stuff, like all this kind of stuff comes up. So for me, for example, like I originally went to, India to become a monk out of ego because I sucked at real life. I was super low MMR. And I was like, oh, cool. Like instead of sucking at this game, I'm going to go play this game. And then like, I'm going to tell everyone that my game is better than their game. So the way that I'm going to feel better about myself is to become a monk. And then all these materialistic noobs that get better grades than I do, I'm going to be better than them because my game is more important than their game. LOL is for noobs and Dota is for experts. So I'm going to get good at Dota because I suck at LOL. And then I'm going to lord it over all the LOL noobs for playing LOL, 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 right? So that's what happened in my mind. And as I went through this process, I uncovered that. I was like, holy crap, this is all ego. Like the reason I'm becoming a monk is out of ego. It's like the fundamentally like wrong decision. So you can sort of discover that your samskars are like there through spiritual practice, and then you can go through the process of digesting them. So as I realized this, I was like, oh crap, like I suck at life. So that's when I decided like, okay, so using a calm and collected mind, I was like, if I become a monk to run away from my problems, that will be running away. So instead, what I need to do to really become a monk is I need to stop pretending to be a monk, go and succeed in the real world. So I have to go back and like, I need to be the best damn student that ever could be because that's where I suck. So I have to like focus on the things that I'm bad at. So I ended up going back and like still lazy, right? So, but the way that I reacted to things changed. The way that I like approached school changed. My personality changed. Whereas I used to run away from things and I started like embracing them, right? I understood it was going to be hard. I didn't get a 4.0. I didn't like come back transformed. That's the other thing is people like assume you come back and you're like transformed and then suddenly you're getting 4.0s. No. Like my first semester back, I got like a 3.0, 3.2, 3.4. Every semester I got a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Graduated with a 2.5. So be it. Right? I'm not going to let like, I noticed, oh, well, like this sucks. Okay. So like, I'm going to acknowledge that it sucks. I'm going to notice my reaction and I'm going to take the right steps forward irrespective of how I feel. And that's when your personality changes, right? So then I got into medical school at Tufts, did that for a while, noticed some ego at the beginning of that. And I was like, okay, I need to step aside from that. Just going to focus on doing what I need to do. Notice my reactions to things. Decide how much I'm going to study. Ironically, I didn't like try to be the best in my class because I was like, that's ego. I'm here to learn medicine, so I'm going to study what I'm capable of. Okay, I can't study for 8 hours a day. So I can study for like 2-3 hours a day. That's the most I'm capable of. And instead of sort of assuming that means, oh God, I'm going to fail, it's like, okay, let's see what happens. Let's observe what happens. If I can study for 2 hours a day, can I optimize that studying for 2 hours and can it be enough? Can I pass? Turns out I can do way better than pass, right? So then it's bizarre, like using that kind of strategy, ending up with like an award of academic achievement at the end of medical school. And so first academic achievement award I've gotten after a string of like C's and D's and F's and crap like that, right? So just focus on your reactions, understand yourself, and then you will naturally start to move in the right direction. And you can absolutely alter PTSD and you can absolutely alter, you can alter it, right? That's the whole point of this lecture, is that which you assume you are can be changed. And the way to change it is to understand your reactions. Because your reactions and how you process that individual moment is going to form how you behave tomorrow. So pay attention to your reactions. I'm going to give you all one last story about this, okay? So I had a patient whose mom was in an abusive relationship. So mom and dad was abusive. Mom and dad divorce. Mom is a way to process all of these like difficult emotional things, started going to church and then became like hyper religious. So like her entire personality like changed over the course of like 5 to 7 years. And then my patient had all kinds of problems because mom would like pressure them to go to church all the time. Because for mom, church was like there for her and was her source of like comfort and safety and salvation when she was going through a really, really hard time. And so then suddenly like for mom, the world became a dangerous place where like there are like people out there who don't have morals who will do to you what your dad did to me. But in the church, I found safety. And so she became super paranoid for her daughter. And was like, you need to go to church. Like, don't date anyone outside of church. You need to go to church. Like, church is the only safe place. Right? That's basically like what her mom kind of like, she didn't realize that like consciously, But that's what through therapy we sort of uncovered. And once like daughter understood this, she was like, okay, like this is the way that my mom survived this experience. This is how she's changed and shaped. Like she's been altered by this, and church was like kind of there for her, right? So that's an example of a powerful samskar forming. And as a result, a personality change. And then like that personality views the rest of the world as dangerous, except there's one safe space. And so of course she's going to push her daughter to like be in that safe space because she doesn't want her daughter to ever end up in a relationship like she had. And so once daughter understood that, once she understood where she's coming from, like that started to like, she started to get a lot better. She understood, you know, why her mom was so pushy for church. She was able to set boundaries with her mom in a much healthier way now that she understood everything. And then her own reactions towards her mom started to change. Her own reactions towards church and like not church and things like that started to change. So personality can absolutely be altered. It comes from understanding your reaction. Okay? Chances of being cured of a personality disorder are pretty good. It takes about 2 years of work. Pretty good. Okay, Dr. K, I have a hard time translating my lessons from reflection to actual behavior. Let's actually move to this. I feel like my actions and responses are so ingrained as habits that they're hard to change despite I know that I need to do something different. How can I fix this? So I want y'all to really pay attention to this question. I have a hard time translating my lessons from reflection to actual behavior. I feel like my actions and responses are so ingrained as habits that they're hard to change despite I know that I need to do something different. How can I fix this? So this is the problem. What is this person truly focused on? They're focused on fixing it, right? They're focused on, I'm having trouble translating my reflections to actions. So subconsciously in their mind, they're using reflection as a shortcut to fixing a problem. But as long as you're using reflection as a shortcut to fixing your problem, what are you truly focused on? You're thinking about the next game of Dota that you need to play. You're not truly reflecting. So all of your attention needs to be focused on the reflection, and none needs to be focused on fixing the problem. Fixing the problem will come. Very common problem. That people are like, okay, now I need to reflect to fix things. But truly in their mind, they're focused on the reflection, on fixing the thing, not on the reflection. And so if you're using reflection as a shortcut to change, then it's going to be tough. Instead, what you need to do is let go of fixing the problem. Just understand yourself. You don't have to fix anything, right? Like, and the way to think about that using the gaming analogy is just learn whatever you can from this replay, right? Like learn whatever you can from this game of Dota. Like try to analyze it. Forget about what you're going to do next game. Don't even think about that. Just learn what you can. What are the mistakes you made? Why did you do this? What's going on here? Those are the questions you should ask yourself. Because as long as you're like focused on fixing a problem, that reflection is not going to be true reflection because you're not truly making like a non-judgmental observation. You're just trying to figure out what's going to work. That's what you're trying to do. So your focus is in the wrong place. That's why the reflection is falling short. So Scallon asks a great question. So what parts are permanent? The ones that make us truly us? That's a fantastic question. Right? So I don't know if you guys saw this, but we did a stream like maybe around the holidays around what is the true self. So y'all can check that out. There's also a lot of details on this on Dr. K's guide about how you figure out the true self. But essentially, this is what it comes down to. So your personality changes, your body changes, your mind changes, right? So like none of those things are you. So what is the you? The you is that which is common amongst all of this change. And so this is where what the yogis essentially described as something that is neti, which is described as not this, not this. So if you can apply an attribute to it, that is not what you are. If you can apply the word tall or any kind of adjective to it, it is not what you are because that can change, right? Tall or short can change. Smart or stupid can change. Young or old can change. Happy or sad can change. So you are that which experiences all of these other things. You are the person who experiences the body as a child and as an adult. You are that which experiences the sadness and the anger and the happiness and the relief. You are that which experiences sitting at the front of the classroom and sitting at the back of the classroom. You are nothing but unfiltered experience. And what happened, the problem is that we get caught up in the individual experiences, that we don't realize that what we truly are is that which experiences. And Descartes sort of knew this, right? So Descartes sort of like his big contribution to philosophy is cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So he said that even if I can be deluded, if I can be tricked by the devil, or I can be altered under the influence of whatever, that was maybe William James. But like no matter what happens, there is something there that exists to be tricked. So even if I'm deluded and I'm mistaken, there exists something which is being tricked, right? That's the core essence. And then the problem was that Descartes went in the wrong direction. So he started with cogito ergo sum, and then he started like piling up stuff on top of that to get to like current reality, whereas the yogis went the other way. So they like he used cogito ergo sum is the launch pad to move upward, and they used it as like the sight to drill down, right? So even if we're in the matrix, as someone is saying, at least there's something that's experiencing the matrix. So that is the true self. And as you meditate, you will start to like move closer to that thing, right? So the purpose of meditation is as we like focus on a particular thing, we're going to like focus on that thing. We're going to push everything else aside. We're going to lose track of like who you are, where you are, when you are, what color your hair is. Like when you're meditating, you don't like all of those aspects of identity disappear. And if you get really practiced at it, you will essentially be left with turiya, which is like pure self. Good question. There's some good stuff here. Okay, we've got other stuff to work on. We've got posts. Chat. Y'all good with posts? Can we do posts? Turiya is Turiya. Will this be uploaded on YouTube? Hopefully. But not everything makes it to YouTube. So someone's asking, what are your thoughts? Okay. Okay. There's good questions here, but we've got other stuff we want to get to. So we have a couple of good posts that I think are like built on this foundation. So I kind of wanted to get to them. Okay. So let's start with this one. I don't want to be helped. Hello, I'm currently lying in bed at 5 a.m. after a bad night's sleep, so this will most likely be a mess. But I need to vent some deep frustration and resentment. I don't want to be helped. It's been a thought I've had during the last few months floating in my head. I'm currently seeing a therapist, just had my 6th or 7th session yesterday, and I've told him about this feeling I have, but so far nothing has come out of it that I can notice. The biggest problems I have currently are all already covered by Dr. K, and so asking advice on those particular problems won't help. See, early 20s male who has never had a significant other or sexual experiences, lack of motivation to turn around my life, lacking social and family life, etc. This has obviously created resentment, anger, and frustration at both myself and the world. As an example of those feelings are the following. Why was I never able to form friendships and romantic relationships when I was starting to be a teen like most teens? After all, they're just teens. How the F did they even know how to get into a relationship? Even in the face of woeful despair and suffering, constantly feeling hurt, sad, and unsatisfied, I don't want to be helped, nor do I want to help myself. I'd rather take the path that will keep me in constant pain, that'll lead me to live an unfulfilling life for the rest of my existence. The most advice I've gotten from my therapist is to try to see the optimism in my situation and to try to work on my self-esteem, whatever that means. I recognize that my life is in a pitiful state, yet I lack the will and motivation to even try to think of a better tomorrow. I wish I would have been born as a different person, a normal person with normal developmental experiences. Thank you for reading this. I wish you all the best. Okay? All right, so this is a really important post. So sometimes in life, we are not doing well, right? And then like something funny happens. Like there's this idea that when we don't do well, like we should dig deep and we should find like inspiration. And the further down we are, like we're going to have this epic comeback story of like retribution and justice. And like the further behind I am, like I want to be that hero, right? I want to be the person who like rises in the face of adversity and like, you know, overcomes like all of these things. But the truth is that for a lot of us, like when our life is crap, we actually bizarrely, and we'll understand this, we don't want to be helped, right? We think we deserve this. And so like, not only do we not rise to the challenge, but anytime we try to find motivation, our mind tells us actually the exact opposite. It says like, screw you. You don't actually deserve help. Like you don't need to get better. Like what you want is like, you know, I don't want to be helped, nor do I want help. I'd rather take the path that will keep me in constant pain, that'll lead me like to live an unfulfilling life, right? Isn't that kind of weird? But that's true, right? That happens to us. Our mind tells us, screw you, you deserve this. And so how do we approach this? How do we like get out of this trap? Like what's going on here? And I think the key word here is deserve, right? So like, who is responsible for this person's situation? So if you guys want to understand this, like it comes down to responsibility. Who's responsible for this? What do y'all think? Who created this situation? You did, right? You created this situation. Like, why was I never able to form relationships? The normal people form relationships, but you weren't able to. Like, they don't even know how to form relationships, and they did it anyway, but I wasn't able to. Right? So then, like, if you're responsible for being unmotivated, not having a significant other, life is going nowhere, how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel towards the person? Maybe this is a better question. How do you feel towards the person who did this to your life? How do you feel about that person? Because they did this to you, right? You're angry with them. What do they deserve? They made your life crap? What's justice in this scenario? Right? Screw that guy. He doesn't deserve to be happy. He doesn't deserve help. What he deserves is constant pain. Because he screwed over my life, and the only justice is for him to suffer because he ruined my life so hard. Right? And so why don't you want help? Because you don't deserve it. Why don't you deserve help? Because you screwed up your life. You had all the opportunities. All the other incompetent teenagers managed to make friends, and you didn't manage to make friends. This is the way that you think about yourself. This is the way that you feel about yourself, right? So of course you're going to reject help because you blame yourself for creating this situation. And like, that's logically consistent because who else could have done it, right? Like, you were in charge. You were the one that chose not to do this, not to do this. And remember, because now the samskara is active, now that the ahamkara is active, all you're going to see in yourself is like your self-blame, right? You're going to look at all the things that you screwed up in life. And what you're never going to notice is that so if no one knows how to make friends, why were some teens able to make friends and some teens weren't? That's actually not your fault. There's something else going on here. It's very possible that the people who were able to make friends had home environments in which they were able to engage with other people. Maybe they had parents who regularly introduced them to strangers, so they learned how to make small talk. Maybe they had large family gatherings where they learned how to tolerate other kinds of things. Maybe they had large family gatherings where like they learned how to be funny. Maybe they had, their parents enrolled them in soccer so that they could like play a game, and like at the age of 15, they scored a goal, and so they felt really good about themselves the next day. The fact that they felt really good about themselves and felt confident made it easier for them to engage with another person. And maybe that's how they were able to make friends. Maybe the reason they were able to make friends is because they were enrolled in soccer, and there were some other kids who were in soccer. And so I see those kids all the time. And we hang out together automatically without any kind of pressure. But the problem is that when we start to hate ourselves and resent ourselves for creating this life for ourselves, right? And I want you to kind of externalize it. Recognize that, who is to blame for this? This person is to blame. What do they deserve? They don't deserve anything good. I want to punish them for doing this to me. Now, the reason we get screwed, and it makes sense, right? Like, I don't blame this person for feeling this way. In fact, I want you all to think about, imagine this was an actual external person. Imagine you're in your 20s and someone did something to you that made it so that you weren't motivated to do anything. You had never been in a relationship. You lack a family life. You lack a social life. Like, imagine they destroyed your life like this. How would you feel towards them? You would be very angry, right? And you want to punish them. Now, the reason that this is really tricky is because that person is you, right? This person ends up being you. And so you don't want to help that person. In fact, you want that person to not get any help. You want to sentence them to the just life of constant pain. And so this is the problem, right? Because what you're doing is sentencing yourself. So how do you overcome this? The first thing is to recognize that like you are justifiably angry towards yourself, right? But the key thing here is that like you've got to learn to forgive, right? Like this is the key thing. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, just forgive. But understand that like this is sort of, what a lot of people taught, like Jesus taught this, Gandhi taught this, MLK taught this, right? Turn the other cheek. It's not an eye for an eye. So as long as you have an eye for an eye mentality, this is going to be the situation that you get into. And this is why like people have made this discovery over the course of life, right? Like over human existence, people sort of said like, hey, forgiveness is actually the healthy way to live life, right? So like learn to forgive. Like, why can't you forgive yourself, right? Like start to practice like compassion. So, and when I say practice, I mean, this is just practice. I'm going to teach you. How do you practice compassion? So think about 15-year-old you. Like you're angry at 15-year-old you for not like learning how to socialize, right? Fine. Fair enough. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of 15-year-old you. What was it like being 15-year-old you? Man, it was terrifying. Like you didn't know what to do. And then like, as you start to like empathize with 15-year-old you, like what do you start to discover? You're like, well, like, it's not like that person had all the power in the world and threw it away, right? If we really start to empathize with our 15-year-old self, it was social anxiety and terror every single day, right? And so he had it hard. And then like, why am I like, it's not his fault that it was hard. He kind of did the best that he could. Like, could he have done better? Sure. Absolutely. But it's not like that. Does 15-year-old you deserve the sentence of a life of constant pain? No, that's ridiculous. Right? So this is the process of empathy and self-compassion. This is how you literally practice gratitude. It's not just forgive, bro. No, don't just forgive. Right? Like that's actually stupid. Don't forgive. Just once again, use observation, like pay attention. What was life like for 15-year-old you? Can I cut 15-year-old me any kind of break? If I could talk to 15-year-old me today, what would I say? Would I say, screw you, you're going to fuck up the rest of my life? No, like you're not going to say that, right? Like there may be a part of you that wants to say that. But that's not what you would actually say to 15-year-old you because you remember what it was like to be 15-year-old you. Right? It's okay to want to say that, but you're not going to do that. That's like cruel and that's not who you are. So you're going to try to be a little bit empathic. And this is key. Because when you say, if you agreed with me when I say that, I'm not going to say that because that's not who I am, boom. You've given yourself a little capacity for forgiveness. right? If you agree with me that you would not have beaten up 15-year-old you, then you've learned a little bit of compassion. You've learned a little bit of empathy, right? And you've like taken the first step to a tiny amount of forgiveness. And once you like take that tiny step, like you can take it again and again and again and again. And once you have forgiven yourself, right? Once you're able to want 15-year-old you to get some help and that it's acceptable to help them, you yourself will be able to accept other people's help. You yourself will be able to want to be helped. But it has to come with you, first of all, letting go of the sentence that you're putting on yourself. It's the judgment. It's this idea that I deserve this, right? And if you deserve it, of course you're not going to find any motivation to change it, right? Because it's what's just. It's like the motivation is not to change it. It's to actually make that prophecy come true. You want to carry out the sentence against yourself. So you're highly motivated to not change, which is exactly what we see. And then we get confused and we beat ourselves up because we're like, well, like, why am I not motivated to change? I wish I was motivated to change. I wish I was motivated to change. And then you beat yourself up even more. And then you've tacked on 15 more years to your life sentence. And the cycle repeats. And there's less forgiveness and more judgment and more judgment. You screw it up, you screw it up, you screw it up. And then like, you're just like, there's no hope for you, right? So take a step back from all of it. First of all, recognize and forgive yourself for being in this situation. Like you're not a complete idiot, right? Like you're just human, just like the rest of us. And sometimes we have a constellation of things that happen to us we end up getting stuck, right? Like sometimes we just get stuck in the mud in life. And then like the more that you spin your wheels, the more you get stuck in the mud. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. That it is our reaction to things that propagate the problems. It is our strategy that we use that actually digs the hole we're in, right? And so start by sort of taking a step back. Start by recognizing that there is a part of you that wishes to punish yourself for putting you in this situation, and that part is completely valid. It's not wrong, right? But it's incomplete. And there's more to the story than that. That thinking is not so black and white. That you don't deserve a life of constant pain. Did you screw up here or there? Absolutely. Could you have done better? Absolutely. But what you need from yourself is not to carry out a sentence of judgment. What you need is like a little bit of pep talk at halftime and get your ass back in the game and like do the best that you can. You can still win this. That's what you need from yourself. And so that starts by, first of all, empathizing with your 15-year-old you and remembering how hard it was to be them. And recognize as well, if you can get this far, that 5 years from now, you can even empathize with mid-20s you, right? Like, do you deserve some compassion here? Like, is your life genuinely hard? Sure, it's your fault, but now you're here and you have no motivation. And like, could you use a little bit of TLC? Absolutely. And if you can sort of admit that to yourself, then you're starting to walk the path of forgiveness. So it's like gratitude and compassion have to be practiced, right? So I'll give you guys one other kind of like meditative practice. The next time someone pisses you off a tiny amount, try to practice some kind of gratitude or compassion towards them. And when you say practice, what do you mean, Dr. K? It can feel fake. That's okay. But I want you to do it anyway. So I want y'all to go play a pub game of some competitive multiplayer like MOBA is ideal, right? And you're going to have some guy who's going to feed and cause you to lose the game. And then like, I want you to literally say to them, better luck next time, dude. Like, you'll do it. Like, I recognize that maybe I was frustrated with you, but like, I didn't play perfect either. Practice some kind of gratitude or compassion towards someone else in your game, right? Like, do that. Practice it. And when you go, but you say, oh, Dr. K, I don't feel it. That's okay. I want you to do it, right? It's a practice. So do it. Practice some kind of compassion towards someone else. Like, set aside your own feelings and recognize, okay, like, how does it feel to throw the game that you were playing when you guys were winning? It feels really bad. And so what do you do with those emotions? You take it out on everyone else. You flame the rest of the universe. And what people need in that moment when you screw up your ult, like in the last team fight, Like you're so angry at yourself you can't even handle it. And you start beating up on other people, flaming all these other noobs. So practice a little bit of compassion, right? So remember what it's like to be if your teammate just lost you the game, remember what it's like when you lose people a game. It sucks. So try to practice a little bit of compassion. Say, hey, we'll get them next time, dude. You played really well. Like, we all made mistakes. Good luck on your next game. Practice some compassion. And that's how we become compassionate. Through practice. We're going to use games to our advantage, folks. Okay? Okay. How do I learn to accept love? Hi, everyone. I'm 18F, and I recently started seeing this guy. This is the first person that I've dated, and I'm starting to notice a few off things regarding how I perceive the relationship. I get uncomfortable when he flirts with me, and at one point I thought he was trying to manipulate me by love bombing me. But when I looked up actual love bombing, he's the farthest from it. Growing up, I didn't have a father, and my mother wasn't very explicit with her love for me, though I knew it was there. I was treated pretty badly throughout my school years and bullied in high school. I find myself having a pretty low sense of self-worth, and I feel unlovable sometimes. I think the guy that I'm seeing is a really good person, and I don't want to screw things up. I don't know how to accept his compliments. I say thank you, but on the inside, I feel like he's lying to me or he pities me. But I know rationally that isn't true. It's just that when he says I'm pretty or he offers to take me home, I feel extremely guilty, and I feel like I need to pay him back in some way. I know people do nice things, and I should just let them, but I feel so guilty because I feel like I don't deserve it. These patterns kind of spill over into my platonic relationships as well. I find myself wanting to love others, but never wanting to be loved. I love spoiling my friends with small gifts or favors, spending time with them, or just being there every time they need me. I feel like I can't depend on people how people depend on me. People say that I'm not a bad person, but I can't help feeling like I am a bad person on the inside, and I just masquerade as a good friend. And eventually someone is going to rip off this mask that I have and discover the truth. Objectively, I know that there are a bunch of discrepancies between reality and how I feel, and I feel silly for putting all of my thoughts out there. If anyone has advice for this, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So, some people are saying, is this me as a girl? I know this is shocking, but sometimes your genitalia does not correlate with your experience, and that men and women can have similar experiences. I know it's shocking. So, I just want to first give a shout out to this person because, I want y'all to, think a little bit about how hard it is to post something like this, right? To feel silly, objectively, to recognize that you're putting something out there that does not internally make sense. It actually makes perfect sense. But, it takes so much to be able to post this, right? Y'all see that? And there's so much here, I'm starting to notice a few off things about how I perceive in the relationship. This is what I mean about the quality of posts. So the person is very aware of what they're experiencing, recognizes some discrepancies, and is able to state it anyway, despite the fact that it kind of feels silly. Because if you have low self-esteem and there's some kind of logical inconsistency, it's really hard for you to ask for help, right? You're like, this is just my stupid head that doesn't make any sense. I don't even know how someone can help someone that's head is as stupid as my thoughts are. But the fact that they're able to do this is actually a huge step in the right direction. They're able to notice some of their thoughts and feelings, which are not perfectly aligned, and they're able to set aside their self-judgment and take a step forward in the right direction. Right? So this is fantastic. I mean, this situation, it sounds tough, but we'll get there too. But I'm really proud of people for the quality of the post. The other thing to remember is that the community deserves a shout out too, because we would not get posts like this unless the responses were solid, right? So if there's a bunch of hatred kind of responses oh, you're a girl, what are you complaining about? Men have it so much harder. Or the flip side of, if there was really invalidating stuff, then people wouldn't post things like this, right? So it's been a lot of hard work, and by hard work I mean I think each and every one of you has been a part of this. I don't think sometimes people realize how you affect the community, right? It's like little things like reading this and not responding in a toxic way or responding in a positive way that make posts like this possible. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Go look at like other places on the internet, right? Like other support communities, like, you know, like /r/sad and like Forever Alone and like other places where there's just a lot of like toxicity. Or there's just kind of like this echo chamber, empty support, right? Which is like, oh, it's never your fault. Like there's some subreddits like that where it's like, it's never your fault. You're awesome. You keep doing you. What I'm really proud of our community for is that we're self-reflective. We will like point out things, but we'll do it with kind of compassion, which is awesome. Okay, so let's get to this. So the first thing is, as we've talked a little bit about today, let's do a quick reminder. So our ahamkar is our sense of identity. Samskar is an experience that we've had that shapes our personality, right? So what happens is we have a bunch of experiences that shape our reactions to things. And based on those experiences, we develop a personality or sense of identity, okay? So if you're in a relationship and you feel like you don't deserve love, and this is like actually a really good example of this, I find myself wanting to love others, but never wanting to be loved, right? I'm the person who spoils others and spends time with them, but like, I can't accept their affection. Like, it's a one-way street because they are good people and they deserve love, but I am not, and therefore I don't, and like compliments make me feel like uncomfortable because I don't really deserve compliments or affection or to be cared for. So where does this kind of sense of self, because this is an identity issue, right? This person does not feel like they deserve love. Like their idea of what they deserve is not this. So there are a couple of important things here. The first is, how does this form, right? So we can kind of see this. I was treated pretty badly throughout my school years and bullied in high school. So I find myself having a pretty low self-worth and I feel unlovable sometimes. So let's just like think about, these are just two sentences, which are just like, I was bullied, so check mark, right, in terms of your history. But what does that actually do to a person? Let's try to understand, what does bullying do to a person? So what do you deserve, right? How do you determine what you deserve? So let's like think a little bit about, you know, like if you're a slave, like if you're a slave, let's say like 1,000 years ago, what did you deserve? Well, like you deserve like less than other people, right? A lot of slaves didn't even feel like they deserved freedom. I mean, I haven't talked to a bunch of slaves, so I don't really know, but I'm making that assumption. But I've definitely seen, for example, like in India, there's still somewhat of like, I mean, there isn't like a strict caste system, but there's like upper class people and lower class people. There are bunches of servants. And you know, like there's like this clear idea of like what each group of people deserves. So there's like a first class cabin in a train, and there's a third class cabin in the train. In the first class cabin, people get to sit down, and the third class people get to stand. So I've seen in my own personal life, like how people are taught what to expect from the world and what they deserve. And so when you're bullied, right, when people like make fun of you, like on a fundamental level, since your mind isn't really that developed, you just get some like basic programming that's really like foundational. So there's not a whole lot of nuance. There's not a whole lot of like understanding or digestion or reflection. There's just, this is how it is. So when you're a 7-year-old and like everyone makes fun of you, what do you learn about yourself? You learn that, oh, I'm the person that people gets made fun of. And who gets the praise and adoration? The bully does, right? Who gets respected and compliments? And who gets treats? The bully does. And what do you get? You get the crap. You get the short end of the stick. You get to be the butt of the jokes. And all the good stuff goes to the bully, and all the bad stuff goes to you. And if this happens to you at a very young age, and it's quite profound and doesn't have the right counterbalancing influences, there's a lot here where like maybe your home life also is important, right? So if like your parents don't support you in the right way or don't give you that sense of identity of like unconditional love to kind of counter that. I'm not saying it's their fault, but like, you know, generally speaking, not everyone being bullied ends up like this. Did we see something about? Yeah, okay. We didn't see much about this person's, what the relationships of their parents are like, but that's where you see a lot of good modeling. So if you sort of learn this about yourself, then it kind of becomes true, right? So it becomes a part of your personality. It becomes a part of your identity, that I'm the butt of jokes and I'm not the person who gets complimented. And believe me, kids are really good at this. Kids are really good at dividing people into groups. There's the popular kids and the not popular kids. There's a reason why high school is brutal. It's because instinctively, we're very hierarchical as children. So there's like the popular kids and the not popular kids. And you get determined, you get placed in a particular category, which you understand and they understand. So once everyone understands the social hierarchy, there's some degree of harmony there because everyone is agreed on what steps people take. And this is why people don't like it when people get uppity in a social hierarchy, right? Like human beings respond very poorly to people getting uppity. We even have a word for it. They're like uppity, like you don't know your place, right? Sure, it's toxic, but it's natural. So what do you do about this, right? So the first thing is to understand that these experiences are carried forward from the past. They don't necessarily reflect on the present. So what our mind does is carries forward energy from our samskars from the past to the present. So for example, like the fact that you don't feel, there was so much resentment, maybe not resentment, there's so much like low self-worth, which you built up during your teenage years, and you haven't processed that, you haven't therapized it, you haven't, spiritually removed it. So you carry all those emotions with you, right? It's like emotional baggage. We understand this in terms of romantic relationships. When you have a bad romantic relationship, you carry the emotional baggage forward. So when you have a life of being bullied, you're carrying that emotional baggage to the present. The key thing here is that you need to recognize that that is not from this. Even though you're feeling it in the present, it is not created from this relationship. Your boyfriend is not love bombing you. Your boyfriend is genuinely like appreciating who you are. But the reason it feels like a love bomb, the reason that it feels fake is because you have this idea from the past that you don't deserve this stuff, right? So if you don't deserve compliments and someone is complimenting you, the only logical conclusion you can come to is there's some kind of manipulation going on, right? It's like really simple. Completely logical. Like, I know the person feels silly, like it doesn't make sense, but it actually makes perfect sense. It's like, if I'm a POS and someone is treating me well, what am I missing? Where's the other shoe? What do they want from me? Like, what's going on here? Because I definitely don't deserve this treatment. It's actually perfectly logical. Okay? But that's emotional baggage carried from the past. So this is where in the moment, when you sort of feel that way, you need to ask yourself, is this a feeling that's being created by this interaction? Or is this an old feeling that is being stirred up? And the more that you're able to recognize, oh, this is a feeling that I've had from the past that's just like reawakening, just notice it, kind of like think through it a little bit, let it go, and then like, be where you are with your boyfriend. And the more that you do that, the more the baggage will kind of like decrease, and the more you'll be able to appreciate the compliments. Okay, that's number one. So number two, and I saw someone kind of post about this or mention this. The other thing is sometimes the way that people react to this is by mastery of the trauma. So this is a common thing that sometimes, this is why the abused become abusers. So there's this psychological thing where like, if I'm on the receiving end of a particular interaction, if I'm the victim and there's a bully, I can become powerful in that scenario by switching roles. So the way that I'm going to like fix this emotional victimization is by becoming the perpetrator, because there's like one victim in the scenario and one person with power. So there's the powerful and the powerless. And in the past, I have been the powerless, and F that, I'm never being powerless again. So how can I become powerful? Oh, I can start bullying people. So this is what you see. You see that like, a lot of bullies like have bad home situations, right? I mean, sometimes they're just assholes and they have good home situations and don't get appropriately parented, which is, I guess, is a bad home situation as well. But so sometimes bullies are because they, parents don't set limits on them. They're like brats and they don't like experience consequences. But then there's the flip side of it too, which is like the reason they're abusive to other kids is because they get abused at home. So like, their parents make fun of them or nasty to them. So they just like learn that behavior and then they mimic it elsewhere. So we can see like mastery of the trauma by like role reversal, like that can happen too. It's not happening in this situation, but that can result, that can happen too. And so then also like, what can you kind of like do about this in a very practical sense? There are a couple of other things to consider. The first is that if you're an altruistic person who does not like to be helped by other people, There's somewhat of a little bit of a trick that you can use for your mind. I don't think it fixes the core problem, but it can help. You can serve as a Band-Aid, which is recognize that sometimes the nicest thing that you can do for someone else is to let them do something nice for you. Right? So like you like the way that it feels to do something good for someone, right? You like to be like a kind person, and recognize that by accepting their compliments is like your opportunity. So just like think about your boyfriend for a second. So your boyfriend thinks you're pretty and says, hey, you look really great today. And if you're like, no, I don't, screw you. Why are you saying that? Right? That's your instinctive reaction. You're like, how does your boyfriend feel? It feels terrible. On the flip side, you could say, if you say like, thank you so much. Like I was having a rough day today, and like hearing that, I'm having trouble believing it, but I'm so like happy that you feel that way. Like, even if you say that, like, how's your boyfriend going to feel? You're going to make him turn him into Chad mode. He's going to be like, damn, my girlfriend was having a bad day and she like can't really accept the compliment, but like still I'm doing something good for her. I feel great about myself because I am making someone else's life better. Right? So when you let other people do things for you, it's like a really nice thing to do for them. Right? And that's like how you form bonds with people. So some time ago, I used to like always turn down gifts. Like people would want to give me gifts. Like I'd have like a mentee, like I'd write like a letter of recommendation or something, right? So advise some kid. And they'd be like, I want to send you like a card to say thank you. I'd be like, you don't need to do that. It's not necessary. But then I realized like I'm actually doing them a disservice, right? It's like, let them express gratitude. Like let them practice gratitude. Like let them express gratitude, and then I will accept their gratitude. And then like, I will just tell them that I appreciate their gratitude. And like, it's great on all sides. So this is so confusing because when I started being a therapist, I was kind of like, it was really tricky, right? Because people would say, thank you so much, Dr. K. And I'm like, I didn't really do much. So it made me uncomfortable. So I wouldn't accept their thanks. I'd like reject it because it made me feel weird. They're like, oh my God, like you've transformed my life. It's like, did I? What are you talking about, bro? We've just chatted for a while. I'm glad you're doing better, but it's mostly you. Right? And then I was like, that's actually kind of doing them a disservice. And so then I'll say like, you're like, I'm so glad that your life is doing better. I think at the end of the day, we meet for 1 hour a week and you're like living your life for 100 hours a week. So I think it's more you than me, but I'm happy to accept whatever gratitude you have. So right on, bro. And like, keep on trucking. And you're very welcome for whatever you're great. Like you're welcome, but it was mostly you. Right. So you just accept accept what they, and then like, cause how is that person going to feel if they come in and they say, thank you so much. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. It's like their gratitude just, it explodes in the hangar. It doesn't like get out there. And so you just accept it. So when someone wants to do something nice for you, recognize that for them, one of the nicest things you can do is as genuinely as possible, try to accept what they want to do for you. And as you start to engage in these kinds of things, you're going to have different scars, right? And you'll start to recognize, like, if this happens enough, like, oh, maybe I am bringing something to the table. Not everything, not as much as this person thinks. I think I'm bringing a little bit less, but I'm bringing something to the table, and I can be happy for that, right? There's some truth to this. So if you have trouble accepting love, you can start by sort of understanding, where does this idea that I don't deserve to be loved come from? You can also start altering your behavior a little bit. Recognize that even though it makes you uncomfortable, it can actually be really, really nice to accept someone else's gratitude. That you're actually like, that's a nice thing to do for them. Kind of a little bit of a Band-Aid. And the last thing is that, I don't know how else to say this, but you seem like a fantastic person. Right? So like, I think you're absolutely deserving of love. Like, I don't get where, like, just like, look at this. Look at how awesome this person is to, like, imagine if this person was in your life. So I find myself wanting to love others. I love spoiling my friends with small gifts and favors, spending time with them. Like, it sounds fantastic. Right? Like, they're self-reflective. They're not automatic. They're not reactive. So like, I'm not surprised that people, are happy to, like this dude is happy to date this girl because she seems like a fantastic person. She may have difficulty recognizing that, but I think we can all agree, right? That this is like a good person to date. And it's okay that doesn't sink in yet, right? Because you've got all this. So this is going to like not make sense. And so this is the last thing that I'll kind of leave y'all with. Objectively, I know there are a bunch of discrepancies between reality and how I feel. And yeah, that's because you were told in the first half of your life that you're unlovable, and now you're being told that you are lovable. And so that's going to feel like a discrepancy because it is one. Because like it sounds like you were surrounded by assholes earlier, and now you're in a like what sounds like a healthy relationship. So like it's going to feel contradictory and silly to you. And this is the real problem. This is the kind of the bullet you have to dodge sometimes. There's a trap here, which is that if you are in a healthy relationship and you like turn to the internet, they're going to tell you, oh my God, he's love bombing you. Don't trust them, right? Depending on who you go to, what echo chamber you choose to participate in, they will actually support whatever your paranoia is. And so then I think this person did the right thing, which is they looked up love bombing and they realized that like that's not what love bombing is. But this is the other problem with the internet, is that we like to label things really, really quickly. And like, here's just a quick aside. So gaslighting is a good example of this. So gaslighting is something that is, generally speaking, a systemic and malicious process that's aimed to disarm someone's like ability of judgment, right? It's like when you convince someone that they're crazy. But nowadays I hear gaslighting used anytime someone has a different opinion from yours. So human beings have different experiences of shared events. Like if I have an argument with my wife about something, I'm going to think one way about it. I'm going to recall one thing and they're going to recall something else. And now I've seen something really tricky, which is that when someone says, you did this to me, and I say, no, I didn't, and they respond with, you're gaslighting me, there's a gaslighter here, you can't argue against that, right? Like it's become something of a weird trump card that like once you play the gaslighting card, it's like, I can't say anything because I'm just gaslighting you further. Like I'm not allowed to have an opinion if you accuse me of gaslighting, because anything I say is just proof of the gaslighting, right? It's like kind of weird what's happening. It's just, no, you don't get to have a different experience or different perspective from me. So be super careful about labels on the internet, because in my experience, interactions tend to be like nuanced and multi-perspective. But what we're starting to do on the internet is get like terminology. Like we had a really good post the other day about someone was like, I had a bad sexual experience. I'm not interested in having sex again. Am I asexual? And I see this a lot nowadays where we're starting to label ourselves with things. We join that identity and then we don't really acknowledge that sexuality is like an evolving process, right? So what happens when we start to label ourselves is like, then we like, I'm asexual because I had a bad sexual experience. I go to an asexual community where everyone else is asexual. They encourage me. They say, hey, you can have a lovely, wonderful experience being asexual. Like it's okay. It's a normal variant of humanity. And I'm fine with that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being asexual. The problem is that sometimes we inappropriately label ourselves. So I've had patients, for example, who have vaginismus, who describe themselves as asexual. So vaginismus is a spasm of the vaginal muscles, which makes it very painful or even impossible for you to have penetrative intercourse. And so they didn't realize they had vaginismus. They just thought they were asexual, which is like fine, right? Like there's nothing wrong with being asexual, but sometimes just because you have difficulty having sex or don't enjoy sex doesn't necessarily mean you're asexual. There's a differential diagnosis for that. But the second we label something, and the second we become a part of that identity, then we could be losing something, right? Like, because that identity may not apply. And I hope to God this is not being interpreted as like Dr. K is against asexual people. I have nothing against asexual people. All I'm saying is don't label yourself too early. Once you've done a very thorough investigation, by all means, label yourself as asexual and live a happy and fulfilling life without sex, which is what most married people have to learn how to do in their 40s and 50s, right? So like we can manage that. So it's okay. Just don't label yourself prematurely and be careful about some of these labels, because don't label your partner as gaslighting when all they're doing is disagreeing, right? Like human beings are allowed to have, because that's the kind of thing that is actually going to negatively hurt your relationships. If you have a relationship with someone and they disagree with you and you start accusing them of gaslighting, like you can't have a conversation there. There can't be a way to resolve that conflict once you play that card. So be super careful about all these like terms that are getting tossed around, which absolutely can describe behavior and sometimes be appropriate. Like another good example is like monkey branching, right? Where people are like, this person's monkey branching. They're waiting till they have their next person in order to, before they break up with this person. And it's like, yeah, some people are like that, but the truth is that sometimes relationships are like complex and they're not intentionally monkey branching. Maybe the reason that they're like breaking up with you and dating this person in rapidity is for all kinds of reasons. One is that they can't tolerate being alone. So like they're just a serial dater. That has nothing to do with monkey branching. That just has to do with their inability to be by themselves. It's a very real possibility. Another option is maybe the relationship was dead on the inside and they didn't realize that until they met someone else that they started to catch feelings for. And that's when they sort of started to realize, and I've seen this too, where it's like, I didn't realize like how bad this relationship was until I met someone else. Like how empty the relationship has become. It doesn't mean they're monkey branchers. There's all kinds of reasons that can explain any given interaction for human beings. So just be a little bit careful about judging things prematurely. And I realize I've come way far astray from the post. But anyway, so kind of going back to this, so like for this person, just be careful about labeling things, right? Recognize, I guess the key takeaway here is that relationships and human beings are complex processes. A human being in and of themselves is an incredibly complex process. Put two of them together, throw in interactions, and you're getting an increased order of magnitude on the complexity of what's going on. So take it slow. It's okay for things to be confusing and conflicting. Ain't no problem with that. As you'll discover, things will resolve themselves over time. And don't label things too quickly or don't stick to those labels. Be flexible around, what your interpretation of the relationship is. Questions? Yeah, so someone saying had to deal with good vibes only and no drama guys. It's so annoying. Yeah, so this is the other thing, right? So sometimes like people will be like, yeah, I'm drama free. I don't do drama. And in adopting that stance, they create drama, right? Because like the thing is, anytime you're going to have two humans in an interaction, there's going to be some kind of conflict. And like the way to be, you can't be drama free. You can be like drama resistant. So you can have like good methods of conflict resolution and like managing drama. Or you can pretend to be drama-free and just peace out anytime like the water gets a little bit rough. And then what ends up happening is you don't build like conflict resolution skills and you enter into your next relationship looking for like drama-free stuff. And then like you have dudes out there who are looking for like drama-free stuff. And like the reason they're looking for it so hard is because there's so much drama everywhere because they're creating it. Right? Like, yeah, I'm not looking for drama. Okay, so like manage it, bro. Right? And it's not just men, like this happens to women too, and non-binary people. I'm judging everyone equally here. But like drama-free only works if you're on an island. And even then today we've seen posts where there's drama in your head with yourself. Right? So like if you want to be drama-free, like don't look to other people. I'm not saying ignore other people because some people, like said person, will attract drama. But recognize that you have a hand in the drama and they have a hand in the drama. And if you want to live a drama-free life, don't worry about finding people that are drama-free. Worry about conflict resolution, right? And then the way that you filter people is based on their ability to participate in conflict resolution. So there's some people out there that can't participate in conflict resolution, i.e. these people who say they're drama-free. Because when you have a conflict with them and you say, hey, I have this issue with you, can we talk about it? And they're like, sorry, I'm drama-free. This sounds like drama to me. I'm out. Right? That's who you want to avoid. Like, so like be careful about drama-free. Like if you want to be drama-free, focus on conflict resolution. Select for people who can participate in conflict resolution. And then you will have a relatively drama-free life. The key to a drama-free life is not the people you select, it's your capacity for conflict resolution. Can I get banned for flipping shown finger? Is that bannable? If so, I apologize either way, but I just was trying to capture that. Okay. Okay, if I get banned, it's going to happen at some point, right? So I didn't mean to offend anyone by that, but it was just, it captured the moment of that attitude, right? Because that's what people do. When people like don't want to participate in conflict, they're just like, I'm out. You can go screw yourself. I'm not participating in that. Right? I mean, y'all have to teach me stuff. I got to know, right? And if I get banned, like I did something arguably inappropriate, so it's fair enough. Questions? Good. It's okay. I flipped you off too. Okay, cool. Have you ever been banned? Not yet. Closest I've been to being banned is academic probation after 1 year at the University of Texas. Meditation for today. Let's do something. I feel like I shouldn't cop out. How can we teach y'all to be observant? Let me think for a second. Okay. Okay, we're going to do a different kind of observational yantra practice. Okay. So this is what we're going to do today. So we're going to do an observation practice that relates to the self and involves a yantra. So this is a good practice. Let's do a different one. Ooh. Okay. So this is a practice that we're going to do today that has a couple of different layers to it, okay? The first is that when we think about... Hold on a second, let me find this. There we go. Hold on a second, chat. Hold on. Okay. So I'm going to teach y'all some meditation today, okay? So let's talk about a couple of basics. So when we're teaching meditation, or when we're trying to select a meditation, we want to think about a couple of different dimensions. The first is, what is the anchor that you prefer? So this is like, there's a Sanskrit phrase, alambana, which means support, which is like, what is the methodology that you like? So for example, some people like the anchor of breath. So it's really easy for them to meditate if it's breath related. Some people like movement or motion. Some people like sound, some people like sight, some people like inquisitive kind of stuff. So there's like the anchors. So today we're going to do a sight anchored meditation. So for those of y'all that like to look at things, like it's easier for you to meditate if you're looking at something. So this can sometimes be good for people who have ADHD. So if you have ADHD, it can be hard to meditate with your eyes closed. So what people with ADHD will find is that their mind wanders a lot when their eyes are closed, but when their eyes are open, or they have something else to distract themselves with, they can actually like focus better, okay? So this is going to be an eye-anchored meditation. The second thing is that this meditation is going to be focused a little bit on the power of observing. So it's going to give you kind of like the skill of observing. So what we're going to do is like literally practice observation. The third thing, so there's like kind of like what the support is, the alambana or the focus. Then there's the skill that's involved, and then there's the goal of meditation. So this meditation ultimately will be identity oriented or ahamkar oriented, or move you one step closer to turiya, or the true self. So for those of you that are like, okay, what am I? I want to be free of like my identity and like all the things that come with my identity, like I'm lazy and all this kind of stuff. Then this is a meditation for you. This is also a meditation for you if doing some of the weird and inquisitive, like closing your eyes kind of stuff doesn't seem to work. You can use this sight-oriented meditation. On Dr. K's guide, for example, we have an index where you can say what kinds of meditation you want to do, and like it'll search through our practices. We'll hopefully grow this over time. There aren't that many. There are maybe like 30 right now. But you can sort of like select based on what kind of tradition you want or what your goal is or things like that. And you can sort of like, it'll give you a list of meditations. So this is kind of like what we're doing here today, okay? So this is what we're going to do. So I want all y'all to sit up straight. Okay? I want you to focus on this. This is a Shiva yantra. Okay? So I want you all to just sit up straight with your back straight, and we're just going to close our eyes. We're going to start by taking 5 good breaths, and we want to slow down our exhalation. So we're going to breathe in for 3 to 5 seconds, whatever feels natural, and then we're going to breathe out slower. So make it nice and slow. Inhale again. And out. In. And out. So we're going to breathe in for a count of 5 and out for a count of 8. So breathe in and out. In for 5 and out for 8. And one last breath in for 5 and out for 8. Now we'll slowly open our eyes and let your gaze fall upon the yantra. If you want to do a Trataka-oriented practice and not blink, that's totally fine, but you don't need to resist blinking. What I want you all to start doing is just look at the picture. And as you look at the picture, notice that your eyes may move around to different places. So notice them doing that you're looking at maybe one part of it, you're appreciating color or shape. Right? So you're kind of looking at it like, that's cool. Your mind may be making judgments to it. Notice now the reaction of your mind as you look at this. Are you wondering where this is going? Do you find my voice distracting and just want to do the process, the meditation? Notice your reactions. And gradually, what I want you to do is move towards the black dot in the center. And as you move towards the black dot in the center, I want you to unfocus your gaze so that you're seeing the whole yantra. While your eyes are centered on a point, notice that your attention can be rotated through different parts. That the image is one thing, but that the seeing is different from the image. I can look at the black dot, but I can see the outer edges of the image. I can look at the black dot, and I can see the black dot. I can put my attention there. Or I can move my attention to the rings, the concentric circles. And so in this way, I want you to look at the black dot, but I want you to rotate between what you see. So we're going to start off by seeing triangles. Right? So just see as many triangles as you can. Now notice that there are white triangles and there are gray triangles. So now you are noticing different things. Even though all of this information about the yantra is there at first glance, notice that even though the information is already there, by rotating your attention, you begin to observe and recognize and realize new things. Right? So now you can notice the petals. So the first thing that I want you to really appreciate is that the notice, the attention, and the observation is actually completely discrete from the sight itself. So what else can you discover within the image? Now go hunting. As best as possible, keep your eyes on the black dot. So even move beyond the yantra itself to the background. And notice that there's so much to discover within this one image. And now we'll move on to a slightly more advanced part of the practice. So it's completely normal to do just what we've done today for maybe a 2-week period for about 10 minutes a day. And now to the advanced practice, I want you to now appreciate the image, what you are looking at, and what you attend to. And now we're going to zoom out and actually focus on our eyes. So there's the image, which is the furthest outside of us. There is our attention, which is the link between us and the image. The image is static, but our attention rotates. Our attention is actually a part of us. And now I want you to just notice the faculty of sight. So notice that you can experience the seeing of things. That you can see objects on the outside, but that there is a seer that is experiencing the object. And that sight is the medium of your experience. But at the end of the day, it is the experiencer that is truly real. The image may not even be there. It is your experience of the image which you truly have. And now try to move back even further, almost inside yourself. And now close your eyes. And notice what that experiencer now experiences. You may see an after image. And appreciate for a moment that even without a stimulus, the experiencer is still there. That even without sight, you can see. So this is the seer. So as you go about your day, pick any kind of experience, whether it be something that you look at, you hear, you taste an interaction, something outside, something inside. And notice that by pulling back from the world, by closing your eyes, assuming that's safe, you can always return to this place. That the experiencer, no matter what it sees, that there is a seer somewhere in there. That in life we attach so much importance to what we see, but not who is doing the looking. We make all kinds of conclusions about where we live and how we live and what we are and what our life is and what it holds for us in the future and what we're destined to. But the more that we retreat from all that crap out there, the more you can realize that there is a seer for whom all things are the same. That when you sit within the seer, there's no such thing as a good image or a bad image. The image is just the image. It's just an experience of two different things. And now we will sit in this place for about a minute. If you have a mantra or a sankalpa, this is the part of the practice where you should repeat it softly to yourself. And now start to return. As you practice this more, you can sit in that space for far longer. But when you're ready, go ahead and come on back. Okay, for those of you saying, I want to live in that place, you're just, you're at the entrance. The place is actually way better inside. And also, when you live in that place, you will have attained moksha. Moksha is the realization, enlightenment, that you are already in that place. You already live there. In fact, it's the only place that you can possibly exist. And so now we're going to end with understanding personality. So this person who exists in that space, how will they react to sitting in the front of the classroom or the back of the classroom? How will they react to something that you find hurtful or something that you find pleasant? How will that person react to fear if they get the question right or the question wrong? And once you realize this is how a monk changes their personality, right? And so the interesting thing here is people are saying doesn't matter or don't care. Is this person apathetic? So this is the key thing. So if I were to tell you now, go sit in the front of the class, what would you say? Right? You'd say, sure. Right? Happy to. Like, it is not apathy, but this is so hard to understand, that the place of neutrality or neti, or not this, is not apathy. It's the very opposite. It's actually a pure engagement with the thing. And so this is what you should adopt, right? So the ability to observe yourself, observe your reactions. And then suddenly all of the energy of the reaction starts to bleed away. And it no longer is as important as you once thought it was. And so someone is saying in the back, there's freedom. Why do you need freedom? You're in class for an hour. Who the hell cares? You can be free the rest of the time. Right? Non-resistance. So many of our problems will melt away if we are non-resistant. Right? And this is where people say, but like, okay, what if I'm in a relationship with an abusive partner? Isn't non-resistance bad there? No, on the contrary. Why do you think you're staying? You're staying because you resist leaving. Non-resistance will lead to freedom from the relationship. Right? This is the key thing that like people are terrified when I try to teach them this. They're like, if I become apathetic, doesn't that mean I'll start doing bad at my job? No, you're not going to be apathetic. You'll start doing better at your job. More importantly, you'll stop putting up with the BS that your job is having you do because you're so avoidant and resistant to leaving or consequences that you let people like walk all over you. So you'll stop doing that. So paradoxically, just about everything that you do will improve the more you enter this state. And if everything about your life starts to improve, what people will see on the outside is that your personality has changed. This is not the same person that I used to know. This is not the doormat that I used to know. This is not the unmotivated person that I used to know. This person has changed. And it's so simple, so easy. Just notice. Notice your reaction. Be observant. Be aware of things. Replay analysis is how you start winning games, not just chain queuing, because that's what we do in life. We just chain queue, right? One day ends, let me just jump into the next day. Autopilot. I'm a cog in a machine. This is what's wrong with the world, is there's a lack of awareness, right? There's even autopilot within echo chambers, labels. Nothing is nuanced. Everything is black and white. You're gaslighting me. No, I have a different opinion. I have a different experience of things. It doesn't mean I'm gaslighting you, but that's what we think, right? So then if you start labeling people, then you start living in that autopilot. Everyone around me is gaslighting me. And the only person who's gaslighting you is yourself. You're gaslighting yourself into thinking that everyone's gaslighting you when no one really is. Someone's saying, can I do this meditation without a guide? The goal is to do it without a guide. No meditations should be done with guides. The goal of meditation is to internalize your awareness. Someone's talking to you, that's not going to internalize your awareness. They can show you how originally. It's like learning how to ride a bike. You may need an assistance at the beginning, but then the goal is to do it without a guide. Right? Who are we rating, chat? Forzen. We've not rated Forzen in a long time, but so be it. Let me just make sure they're live. All right, we're going to raid Forzen. We'll see y'all on Wednesday. I am hungry. I'm very hungry. So be it, chat. I shall give in to my desire to eat as soon as the work is finished. Right? So we'll see y'all on Wednesday. Take care, and I hope today was helpful.